Hopefully we can jazz it up here a little bit. I'm excited to talk to you guys today. I'm Dan Olsen. I'm going to be sharing some advice on mastering the problem space and how to achieve product market fit today. Just a little bit about my background so you know where I'm coming from. I started out with an engineering background. Actually, my first job was designing submarines. And then I moved out here a while ago to go to business school at Stanford, and that's where I learned about product management, this career called product management. And when I heard about it, I said, that's what I want to do. Sounds awesome. And I asked people, where's the best place to learn how to do it, since I had never done it, and they said Intuit. So I was fortunate to get a job at Intuit. I worked there for a while. Then I was a product leader at some startups. And then I got into being a product management consultant, which is what I do today. I also am a big believer in sharing best practices. So for 4.5 years now, I have a meetup called Lean Product down in Mountain View, where each month I host a top product speaker as well. So if you're interested, you should check it out. It's down, like I said, down at Intuit's headquarters. My Twitter handle is @Dan Olsen. And I put my slides and talks on my website, dan-olsen.com. Who here is in product management? All right, sometimes I speak at different conferences. We have a lot of product managers. So I just want to start out by adding, sharing some deep wisdom from product management, which is the product manager's motto. So it's a little bit like Spider-Man's motto. I'm guessing we have some in the Bay Area. There must be some Marvel fans who know Spider-Man. Who knows Spider-Man's motto? Yell it out if you know it. With great power comes great responsibility. Right. The PM motto is a little similar, but it's a little different, which is with great responsibility comes no power, basically. And we're laughing on the outside, but we're crying a little bit on the inside, too. It's a little sad that we have to influence without authority, right, and get people to do things. So anyway, we're responsible for a lot of things as product managers. I'm sure the speakers today are covering a lot of different things that we should be doing as PMs. One of the main things we're responsible for is product market fit. And product market fit is kind of a buzzword. It was coined by Mark Andreessen back in 2007, and then it got popular with the lean startup movement. So some of the terms like MVP can be hotly debated within your company. I'm sure people disagree a lot on that. Product market fit people talk about more simplistically, like, oh, Box, yeah, they succeeded because they had product market fit. Startup X, sadly, they failed because they did not have product market fit. So people talk about it simplistically like this true or false kind of condition. As an engineering background kind of person, I was like, I wanted to create a framework for how to achieve it. And after working on so many companies and products, I kind of came up with a framework. And so that's what I want to share with you today. That's also why I wrote my book, The Lean Product Playbook. I like to give a copy away. The way you can win a copy is to tweet. So if you send a tweet with my handle @Dan Olsen, if you want to throw in some hashtags or whatever, happy to give a book out later on. I'll announce the winner on Twitter. But the key framework for how to achieve product market fit is the product market fit pyramid. And I want to walk you through that. This is basically the key framework for the book and how to achieve product market fit. It's got 5 layers. It's a pyramid. And each layer builds on top of the other layers. So the first layer is your target customer, the bottom. It's the foundation of the pyramid. Whose life are we trying to make better? Who are we trying to create value for? Everything starts with that. And if we change who we're focused on, then everything above it could change as well. And the next layer up for them is for that customer, what are their underserved needs? We want to focus on customer needs and how we can create value for them by delivering customer benefits. And the word underserved is important there. We don't want to, if someone's perfectly happy with how something's getting met today, then that's probably not what we want to target. We want to target things that aren't being served so well. But taken together, this is basically the market. These 2 layers form the market. And if you look in an economics or marketing textbook, it'll say a market is a group of people that share a set of common needs. So that's the market. You don't actually control the market. You can decide which one you want to try to go after. What you control are the 3 product layers of the pyramid. And the first one is your value proposition. This is which benefits are we actually going to say our product delivers on, and how are we going to do so in a way that's better or different than the competition. And this basically, in an ideal world, will build on top of underserved needs. The next layer up is feature set. This is the functionality that actually conveys those benefits to the user. And then finally, the user experience, which is what they actually interact with to use the features to get the benefits, right? And so one way of looking at this is these are the 5 key hypotheses that you need to get right enough to achieve product market fit. So what I'm trying to say is you need to be, have a good enough idea about your target customer, their underserved needs, value prop, feature set, and UX. And if all 5 of those, the ands, are good enough, then you'll achieve product market fit. And when you see this framework this way, basically product market fit is just how well are all the assumptions and execution that we're doing in these 2 layers, how well does it resonate with the market, basically. So that's the product market fit pyramid. The other thing is, since this is a B2B conference, a lot of times we have more than one customer. I'm using customer in the broadest sense. So if you have a buyer versus an end user versus an admin, basically each of those has its own pyramid, right? Each of those is a distinct customer with potentially distinct customer needs. And at some point they might merge up into the same feature set in UX, but they might be distinct. Like you can think of admin use cases where there are admin UIs and features that no one else can use. But so it's meant in the broadest sense, if you have multiple people or you have a two-sided market, you've got to think about the needs and the pyramid for both of them. And once I had this pyramid, I realized I could create a process to help people work through these key hypotheses, and I call that the lean product process. And all you do is you start at the bottom with step 1, and you articulate your hypotheses about your target customer. You move up to step 2, their needs, step 3, value prop, 4, 5. And then when you've got a user experience, whether it's a live product or a prototype, I'm a big fan of using tappable or clickable prototypes to test your hypotheses. Then there's a 6th step where you take that prototype or your live product and you close the loop with customers to test with them and get feedback to see where you're at in product market fit. And this is obviously an iterative process, but that's the lean product process. And my focus of my talk today is just going to be that many product teams focus here. They spend a lot of time on what features should we build and what features do our competitors have and what should the UX be. And I think it's to the detriment of their product strategy. And so what I'm going to be focusing on today, I only have 30 minutes, is just these 2 steps. So I want to go deep in those 2 steps. Obviously, target customer is important. I just don't have time to get into that today. But there's fundamentally a big difference between these top 2 layers and these bottom layers. And the top 2 layers are what I call solution space, right? This is basically the solutions that you're building that customers are using. But to really deliver product market fit and a lot of customer value, you need to be product teams need to be thinking a lot more deeply about these problem space layers. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on today. Who's heard of, Which way is it pointing? Go for it. Okay. Is that better? All right, cool. See, we iterated. We're good. We improved mic market fit. All right. So, and who's heard of problem space before? Here, a few people have. So I'm excited to hear more and more people using that term. But let me define how I view what those 2 different things are. Problem space is basically a customer problem, a customer need, or a benefit that the product should address. So if I said, I want to create a way to make it easier to share photos with your friends, that statement, make it easier to share photos with your friends, would be in the problem space. If the next thing that I said was, and last month I built an app that actually does that, that app would be in the solution space. Or if my friend Mike was a designer and he created an awesome set of mock-ups for that app, those set of mock-ups would be in the solution space. So that's the difference, basically. Problem space also, if you may know the user story format, a well-written user story, as a blank, I want a blank so I can blank. Right? Problem space focuses on that so I can. Like, what's that core reason that it's going to create value for the customer? And again, solution space is specific implementation or design to address that need. So we're trying to decouple that. A lot of times, a lot of teams just start jumping right into designing or building things without getting really clear on what problem they're trying to solve. And I understand why. At the end of the day, developers have to code something and launch something. Designers have to design something. And we live in solution space. So it's natural to be like gravitating towards solution space. But I think good PMs are able to decouple problems and solutions and get really clear to make sure that we're clear on the problem and that our solution that we're about to build is going to solve that problem. The example I like to share to illustrate this is when NASA was sending astronauts into space, they knew that the ballpoint pens that we use here that rely on gravity wouldn't work because there's no gravity up there. And it wasn't NASA, but one of their contractors, and NASA didn't ask them to do it, one of the contractors said, you know what, I think we can invent a pen that can write in space without gravity. And he went off and spent $1 million of R&D, and he invented the space pen. And I have one right here. So they're pretty cool. I haven't verified it myself, but they tell me this writes in space. If anyone works at NASA and wants to help me validate that, that'd be cool. But basically, they did it. And if you read about this, you'll see there's an urban legend, basically, that NASA spent $1 million. It wasn't NASA, and NASA didn't add them to, but they did spend $1 million. Faced with the same challenge, the Russians gave their astronauts pencils. And you can actually get a Russian space pen. It's a red pencil in a box poking fun at the space pen, right? So why do I share this example? I share the example, one, obviously, if these 2 solutions are equally good at solving the problem, then the one that didn't take $1 million and all that time and effort is better solution, a higher ROI. Right? That's the obvious lesson here. But the more subtle lesson here is that it's really easy, even when you're trying to focus on problem space, it's really easy to let solution space thinking creep in. And I call it solution pollution. So when the head of the Fisher Pen Company said, you know what, I think I can invent a pen that writes in space, and that was his problem statement, he had some solution pollution in his requirements. What would he have in his, what was the pollution that he had? Yeah, the word pen. It was like he baked the solution in the requirements, right? Not surprisingly, because they were a pen company, so they were focused on pens, right? And so we want to basically avoid solution pollution, and this happens in our feature teams, and I'll talk about this in a sec. We want to avoid this, right? It would have been better if you had just been vague and said, a way to write in space. That would have been a little more solution agnostic, right? And the number one tactic to get people, if somebody proposes something in the solution space, is to just get at why. Because what's going on is in their head, they're proposing a solution and jumping to it, but subconsciously they're thinking there's a problem and they believe that that solution is going to solve that problem. That's basically what's going on, right? And we can ask why. Even with the astronauts, it's like, why do astronauts need to write in space? Like, why do they need to do that? Anybody? Write things down and refer to it later. That's an even better problem space statement, and maybe that opens up the solution space to crazy Siri-like voice commands or something like that, right, where you talk to it or something like that. And how does this play out on our feature teams, right? This plays out in our Jira tickets and Trello tickets where it says, like, add a drop-down that does blah, 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 right? Build a wizard. Add an API call. Are those problems or solutions, right? Those are all solutions, right? And so we're doing that shortcut. We're skipping the problem when we do that. Same thing in Trello, right? Add a menu, create a settings screen, add a database table. And so when you see someone on your team doing that, maybe that's the best way. Maybe that's the best way to solve the customer problem, but maybe not. And we're not sure. You have people just building something without really clear on the problem. So asking why is a key technique to do that. Let's talk about more of a software example. I used to work at Intuit. One of our big products is TurboTax. Who used TurboTax here? Yeah? We've forgotten about it now. It was like 6 months ago. We want to just forget about it. That's cool. Right? So it's a tax prep. It's an application, so it's in the solution space. It competes with another application, TaxCut, right? And what we can do is try to map between the two. What you want to do is start in problem space and map, but we can try to reverse engineer what value TurboTax creates. For those of you that use TurboTax, what value, why did you use it? What value did it create for you? You didn't know the tax code or the tax rules, right? It's convenient, yeah. Cheaper, yeah. Ease of use, yeah. Automation, yeah. Cool. Anybody else? It's the last minute. If you procrastinated, it's your only option, right? So that's the thing. See, this is beauty. That's the beauty of it. Is you can have these great. You can talk to customers in customer discovery interviews and get these value statements. Now, did I get the same statement from any one of you guys? No. So that's the thing about the problem space. It's very messy. How am I supposed to? I'm the PM for TurboTax. How do I make sense of the automation versus the convenience versus the rules, right? How do I make sense of that, right? So it's like, forget it. Let's just code something and ship it. Let's not worry about problem space. But our job is to figure out the problem space. I would argue PM's main job is to bring that to the table. The designers are going to design. The developers are going to build, right? Our job is to really understand the customer and their needs. And so what we want to do is start out with some high-level context. So if I had to, you guys were given some detailed answers, which is great. If we got to some general context, it would be something about, like, help me do my taxes, help me prepare my taxes, right? And obviously that's not detailed enough. We want to get more detailed to the kind of statements that you guys are making. But the other person that really helped me appreciate the difference between problem space and solution space was the founder of Intuit, Scott Cook. And when he would give a talk to a group of PMs like this, he always used to love asking the question, who's the biggest competitor to TurboTax? And we'd all be excited and hope he would pick us so we could get the answer right for the founder, right? And he'd pick you and you'd say, it's TaxCut. He's like, no, you're wrong. It's pen and paper because more Americans get their taxes done with pen and paper, basically, right? Catch up with me here. There you go, pen and paper, right? And that's the other thing is that a lot of times we focus on the software competitors that we have, but there are other ways that people are getting things met, right? Excel hacks or workarounds or other things. And so what we want to do is focus on the problem, because the problems don't change anywhere near as much as the technology solutions, the waves of solutions that come and go. So what we want to do is start in the problem space instead of the solution space. Let's say we were working on a tax product like TurboTax. What you want to do is, once you're clear on the context, is as a team brainstorm what are all the different ways we can help people with their taxes. Just do divergent thinking. We're not saying we're going to do all these things, but it's fun to explore the problem space to think about all the ways you could create value. We might come up things with, well, it can check my taxes. A computer compared to pen and paper, it can make sure I don't make any math mistakes, right? It can file my taxes. Instead of having to print them out and go to the post office, you can file at the last minute. Just push a button, right? It can ask you questions and help you maximize your deductions, save you money on your tax return. It can help you reduce your audit risk. These are just 4 examples, basically. But you'll notice that they follow a certain pattern. They all start with a verb, like an action word, because it's actually doing something to create value for the customer. And they're written not from the technology's perspective or the company's perspective, but from the customer's perspective, right? And so what you want to do is basically peel the onion. I want to show an onion here, because a lot of times on product teams, we stay at the outer layer of the onion, and it sounds good, but like the real way to create value and achieve deep product market fit is to peel the onion and get very specific. Now, if you do that and you brainstorm, say, dozens of potential benefits that you could do, it can be kind of messy, right? Even this little mini exercise here with 6 or 7 answers was a little messy. I had answers all over the place. So it is a little messy, but you will find that there are clusters of related benefits. So let's say we take these 3 benefits: help me prepare my taxes, reduce my audit risk, and check my return. And we ask people in customer discovery news, why is that valuable? Why is that valuable, right? What I'll be doing is I'll get them to kind of do higher level answers, right? And by asking them why, because people can start out very specific. And I might find that these are all ladder up, we call it benefit ladders, to a common theme of, say, empowerment or confidence. And the way this might go is kind of like the story you were saying, is like, hey, I don't know the tax code. Maybe I'm not good at computers, I'm not good at numbers or math, but every year I got to file my return, or else they're going to come after me or find me or throw me in jail. So every year I'm like stressed out having to do this and figure this out. And then, a friend told me about TurboTax. I used it. It just asked me questions and held my hand. And next thing you know, step by step, I'm done with my taxes. That might be the story about empowerment or confidence, right? And I call that, again, a benefit ladder, where even though there are different detailed benefits, they all ladder up to that same kind of benefit. There can be a completely separate ladder that has nothing to do with that. It has more to do with just saving you time. It's kind of an orthogonal benefit, right? Some people mentioned that when we were just talking here. And we could talk about, well, saving time preparing. If you took a stopwatch compared to the old way, it took me 5 days, and now it takes me 1 day. Or filing, right? Mailing it versus doing it online. And there could be a whole separate ladder about saving money. Saving money by maximizing your tax deductions, or saving money compared to a CPA, right? So these are 3 distinct benefit ladders for TurboTax. And this is what I call a problem space definition, basically. You don't have to go like 3 or 4 levels deep. 2 levels deep is adequate. You've got your detailed benefits and then your overall ladders here, right? But I think this is, frankly, like one of the main value adds that product managers can bring to their team, is exploring this and defining this so that as ideas come up, we're clear on what problems we're going to solve for people. We want to start here and then map in a solution space. So I've spent a little time talking about the needs. Now I want to move on to talking about the value proposition. And again, your value proposition, once we've explored the problem space, we've kind of suspended judgment. We're exploring all the possibilities. Now it's time to figure out, well, which ones are we actually going to focus on? What are we going to actually tell customers that our product does for them? And how are we going to be better than the other competitors that are out there, right? That's what your value prop is. And the tool that I like to use for this is the Kano model, which has to do basically on the horizontal axis with, for each need that we're talking about, how fully does the product meet it? From not at all to the product fully meets the need. And then on the y-axis, as a result of how much the product meets that particular need, how much user satisfaction or dissatisfaction results. Right? And if it seems a little complicated, the cool thing about the Kano model is it breaks all the benefits and features down into one of 3 categories. The first and clearest is a performance benefit or feature. The more the product meets this need, the more customer value or satisfaction is created. The less it meets the need, the less, right? If we were in the microprocessor business and our chip was 15% faster than everybody else's, we'd be like 15% higher performance. If I was shopping for a car, say, and I saw 2 cars and they were pretty similar, but then all of a sudden I realized one car has twice the miles per gallon of the other car, all other things being equal, I'd pick that car because for most people, miles per gallon is a performance benefit, right? So that's performance. The second category is must-haves. Now, having a must-have doesn't actually make anybody happy, right? But not having the must-haves makes people unhappy. That's the definition of a must-have, right? And sticking with cars, say I was shopping for a new car, and I went into the showroom, and I saw a car that looked great. And I read the spec sheet on the window, and I really liked the specs, and I was thinking, yeah, this is the car for me. But then I looked inside, and I realized, wow, there's no seatbelts in this car, right? I wouldn't buy it because I'd be afraid of getting hurt or dying, right? So seatbelts are a must-have for a car. But if car A has 5 seatbelts, and car B has 100 seatbelts, I don't say car B is 20 times better than car A. Right? Once you have 1 seatbelt per person, you basically flattened off, and you've checked things off, right? The final category is delighters, or wow features, basically. So not having a delighter doesn't cause any problem because people aren't expecting them to be there. But having a delighter can create a lot of positive customer value. Not today, but when the first cars, sticking with cars, came out with GPS navigation, it was a delighter, right? Before that, people were printing out Google Maps or getting lost. And then the first people that had GPS navigation just put in your address, and it fundamentally changes how you got from point A to point B. But as we know over time, more and more cars got GPS navigation, and Garmin and TomTom came out with their devices, and now we all just use our phones. So that just shows that this is not a static picture, it's dynamic basically, that these needs and features migrate over time, so that yesterday's delighters become today's performance features and become tomorrow's must-haves. And the pace with which that happens just depends on the level of competition and innovation in your space. But what we want to do is use these three categories, take our benefits, and use these three categories to categorize them to get clear on how we're going to be better than the competition. And we're going to put these into what I call the value proposition grid, basically. And what you want to do to create this grid, I've kept this generic, is for your product category, one per row, list out what are the must-have benefits. One per row, what are the performance benefits. One per row, what are the delighter benefits. So that's step one. Step two is create a column for each of your key competitors, and then a column for your product. Step three is rate or score your competitors, right? And so if you have numbers, you can use numbers, or you can just use high, medium, low. It's fine. As long as the ratings make sense as you look across a row on a relative basis, that's fine. But say you were in the microprocessor business, you could put numbers in, but low, medium, high is fine. So in this case, both of our competitors have the must-have benefit. Competitor A is the best at performance benefit 1. Competitor B is the best at performance benefit 2. They're both so-so at performance benefit 3. And these guys have a delighter here, right? So this is the backdrop upon which we want to figure out how we're going to be better and create more value for our customers, right? This is the essence of competitive analysis. And it may be tempting to try to be high, high, high. I run these workshops all the time, and the other time I ran it, and there were 6 benefits, and one team put 5 of the 6 high. So Steve Jobs has a good quote about, it's innovation's about saying no. So if there's ever a team that only picks 1 high, I award them the Steve Jobs Award. But so we want to pick our battles, right? We don't have the resources to beat everybody on every dimension, and it's not really strategic, and it doesn't provide a clear value, positioning in the marketplace. So given this backdrop, we might go with a value proposition like this. Of course, we're going to have the must-have. We're going to do a little bit on performance benefit 1, but we're not going to try to be better than competitor A. We're going to say no and not worry about performance benefit 2. And we're going to focus on being the best at performance benefit 3, right? Maybe we've identified some market segment that really values that benefit, or maybe we have some technology solution ideas as to how we can deliver better value than these other people there. And then we have our own idea for a delighter as well. What matters the most from this exercise is what's called your unique differentiators. And that is, what's the performance benefit where you're going to be the best, and what are the unique delighters that you have, basically, right? That's the point of this exercise. In the process, lean product process, we don't have time to cover the rest of it today. This would inform our MVP and our feature set and our UX design so that we go and test and validate this. But we want to get clear on what this is. And a couple of points on how to create a winning value proposition. You don't compete on must-haves. You just don't compete. You have to have them, but you're not going to win in the marketplace, right? And sometimes I see people launch MVPs that just have the must-haves, and then they don't do well. You need to be the best on at least one performance benefit, right? If you can also have a delighter in addition, that's a very powerful combination. And when you start to look at products through this lens, and you see products that suddenly launch and quickly become number 1 in the category, it's often because they've got this 1-2 punch of a clear outperforming benefit and a clear delighter. And so I just actually want to close with an example of that. Now, I've mentioned TurboTax. Now I'm mentioning Instagram. Who's familiar with Instagram here? Right, a lot of people. So I know these aren't B2B examples, but I bring them up because most people are familiar with them. Just because these are B2C examples, the same concepts apply for your B2B products, as I was saying. But Instagram was one of these products that when they launched, there were already a lot of other photo sharing apps in the market. And yet they quickly became number 1. And if we look at it through the Kano model value prop grid, I think we can basically reverse engineer why that was the case. So do you guys remember when they came out? What are some things that they did to out-delight or outperform the other photo sharing apps? Filters. Good. Is that a solution or a problem? That's a solution, right? So if we do why does that create value? What value did the filters create for you?
What value? They make my stuff look cool.
Yeah, they make your pictures look good. That's right, right. So they had and would you say that was a delighter or performance? I think it was a delighter, yeah. I think the number 1 thing I get is that your filters delighted by making my photos look better. That's right. Cool, so we got their delighter. Any other delighters or performance? Any other way they outperform the other photo sharing apps? Or other things they did to make your photos look good? Share easily, yeah. Yeah. So Zach's turning his phone, right? So when you take a picture, you can take a picture this way, landscape, or you can take a picture this way. And you remember they were kind of annoying, like your pictures are suddenly square. You're like, why are you making my picture square? The reason they did it is if you were to try to put these kind of photos and these kind of photos into a feed, these kind of photos would have to get shrunk down, and it wouldn't look as good. But when they're square, you don't have to shrink any of them down. They all can be the same size, and the feed looks nice. So that was a secondary feature that supported the benefit of making your photos look good when it was in the feed. Right. So we got those as delighters. There was one way that they outperformed, and the typical way to know you're talking about performance is if you can measure something and quantify how they were better. Is there anything you can think of how they did something better? Yeah? Yeah, yeah. I think different people had social media stuff. Yeah. Yeah, times. So if you took a stopwatch and you talk like how long does it take to post my or upload my photo, that's the key of a save time benefit. You take a stopwatch with the other apps. It takes about 5, 6, 7 seconds for the other apps to upload. But with Instagram, it took like 2 or 3 seconds, right? That was it. So they outperformed. But the funny thing is, how did they do that? They actually did it with a clever UX hack. And the guy wrote a post about it. You can find it online. What they did is all the other apps, they waited. You would take a picture in the app, and then you'd look at it, and there'd be a button that would say like post or share. And they would wait till the user pushed that button before they started uploading it. Well, the Instagram team just said, you know what, like 90% of the time, the people are uploading the photo anyway. Let's just start uploading it the second we can. So what they did is they started uploading it, and then if they didn't upload it, if they didn't push the button, they would just ignore it on the back end, right? And I'm sure they had good network and compression and all that jazz, but that basically was it. So by the time you checked out your photo and pushed the button, it was like 2 or 3 seconds later, and so their perception was that it uploaded faster. Cool, so let's put this into our grid. Right, I want to show you this with the grid. So we have our must-haves, our performance, our delighters. We have other photo sharing apps. We have Instagram. This makes sense for what we're talking about, right? We didn't even talk about the must-have, but obviously if you're a photo sharing app, you need to let me share my photos. Everybody does that. On the performance, post my photos quickly, we have low, and because of their clever UX hack, we have high. And then on make my photos look good, we have no versus yes, right? And again, back to the dynamic nature, do more and more products. They were the first one to really have filters, but now like most of them have filters, right? So it went from being a delighter to like you pretty much need to have filters these days. All right, cool. And does anyone remember, so these actually, back to the unique differentiators, right? This is the combo, that was what I was saying about having a powerful combination of a clear outperformer, like uploading faster, and a clear delighter. That explains kind of how they were able to get #1 in the marketplace, right, in a crowded market. And again, if you look through these lenses, I don't have time today, but I have in my other workshops and stuff, there's an Uber example as well. Does anyone remember what Instagram's tagline was back then, back in the early days? I wouldn't expect anybody to, but again, it's in the same article. The guy shared it. Their tagline was fast, beautiful photo sharing, right? And the cool thing about this tagline is they pack a lot into just 4 words. They packed in their must-have, photo sharing from their value prop. They packed in their performance, fast, and they packed in their delighter, right? So that's that's the other cool thing about value prop. Not only does it help you inform your feature set and how you're going to win, but it can also help you have very clear and compelling messaging as well. So I think that Instagram, clearly they knew what they were doing when they made that tagline and how they're going to win and beat the other photo sharing apps. So to sum up, to master the problem space, remember with no power comes great responsibility. Don't jump to solutions. Start in the problem space. Avoid solution pollution, that temptation by asking why. Define your problem space with benefit ladders. Again, I think that's one of the main value adds you can do as a PM on your team. And then you can use the value prop grid and Kano model that I showed you to answer those questions. How will my product be the best? As I mentioned, I run a meetup down in Silicon Valley, down in Mountain View. You can go to that URL. Our next one is on November 8th with Barry O'Reilly, the author of Lean Enterprise. He has his new book, Unlearn, coming out. We have dinner, so if you're up for checking it out, go for it. And then here's my information. There's the meetup URL again. I'll announce the book winner on Twitter, and I'm happy to answer a few questions before we get the next speaker up here. Thanks. Yeah.
How do you properly stack up your product against nothing or a manual solution?
Well, VCs are famous for when entrepreneurs come in and they say, "Who's your competition?" It's like nobody. They don't like to hear that answer. And I think the reality is there is something that people are doing today. So you can use the same thing. You can stack it up. I mean, a lot of times, save time tends to be one of the benefits because the manual hack or the manual thing is just going to take a lot more time, right? So if you focus on exactly how you're going to be better than the manual hack, you should be able to articulate with customer benefits of saving time or other benefits that are distinct to your solution. Yeah, I mean, yeah. And I think by doing customer discovery interviews, so yeah, that's what I would say. I think you can use the framework to get at how you're going to be more productive for them. Yeah?
How do you think somebody who's working on, say, mature or a product that being in the market, say I'm a PM for TurboTax and my goal by this year is like the new standard effect.
Is new what?
The new tax, there are new tax laws that have been implemented in the product. So how can I apply some of these principles? A lot of these apply great like when you're starting a new product or like we're in the early stage.
Yeah.
But how about like mature products where, and that's, I assume that's where we that's our product candidate. We are aiming at products.
Yeah. TurboTax is pretty mature. It's been around. It was on DOS back in the day, right? So the cool thing about them is the tax laws, of course, change every year, but they find new ways to add value. So going back to that problem space definition, right? Of several years ago, for example, they did things like, they said, hey, you're going to get a tax refund? Do you want your money now instead of 3 weeks from now? And so they created a problem. Right? They talked to people. They realized some people want their money quicker. They're willing to pay for that. And so they offered that service. So it's definitely not just a static. You never get to the point where you're like, hey, we've solved all the problems for the person within our context. You may have nailed certain parts of the problem space, but the question then becomes, what's the next incremental part of the problem space that's going to add value? So audit defense, early tax returns, talking to a person, like upselling, like, yeah, we're going to help you TurboTax. If you have questions, you can go and do that, right? So, and what those end up doing is a lot of times those end up helping you segment your market and charge more for those incremental services. And so for any new incremental service or feature you're going to add, you got to go through the same exercise again, no matter how kind of mature your product is. You know what I mean? So I think TurboTax actually is a great example of how they continually find new ways to create more value within the domain of tax, and not just saying, oh yeah, it's just about doing your tax return. And so I think that's the trap that people fall into is drawing their problem space too narrowly. And I think it's actually because they're not drawing that constraint in problem space, they're drawing it in solution space. They said, hey, we nailed these 20 features. We've got the longest feature checklist of anybody. We're kind of done. But if you go back to problem space and say, no, what we're all about is helping people with everything related to their taxes, you will find additional opportunities to fulfill that mission, I think. Yeah?
Could you put your current product in the competitor space and then maybe think about it that way? Like, what more could we be doing?
Yeah, you could, sure. Definitely, that's a good point, yeah. Yeah. And I think, by talking, anyway, you can talk to your customers, you're going to find things that you're not doing as well as you could, or adjacent needs that you can find, definitely. Yeah?
You had that slide on the Europe user stories, you kind of implying that those maybe wasn't the best way to write those. What if the PM had gone through this process already? They talked about the problem space first, research, and then they came up with a solution. But
Sure.
the right process, are those user stories still not working for it?
I don't know, man. I mean, they're not user stories. Like, if you say, build an API call, I don't think anybody would say who thinks that's a user story? That's not a user story. It's a task. That's an engineering task. Theoretically, there's no real problem if what you said is true about people being rigorous. I would argue, though, that it's great to have your devs know the why behind what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like, because, as smart as we are as PMs, if I just heard you say the PM came up with a solution. Well, I would want the PM, designer, and developer to come up with a solution together, and between the three of them, you might have a better one, right? So a common way to have the problem and the solution is Jira support subtasks. And so what best practice I've seen is the PM writes the user story with the reason why, kind of this problem space, and then the engineers put in the tasks, what they actually are going to do. And then you have that tight mapping between the two. So, but to your point, hey, if there's really good tight mapping and that thought work has gone somewhere else, I hear you. That's not as bad as just jumping right in. But I still think it's helpful if the rest of the team knows the why, because there's always going to be little decisions they need to make on the margin in implementing a feature. You can't fully spec everything out to the nth degree, and it helps them to know why. And they may know something you don't. You may have come up with what you think is the best solution. Like, hey, you know what? I just got this new JavaScript framework. It's got this cool new UI widget. I think this would be even better based on now that I understand what you're trying to accomplish. You know what I mean? So that's the spirit of it, basically. Yeah. All right, cool. Why don't I stop there? I'm happy to answer questions at the break. Thanks, guys.